A 10-year-old's bike was dumped in the lake by HOA President Janice Porter for violating clutter rules. Smirking behind her sunglasses, she treated a child's joy like garbage and expected no consequences. But Eli's dad, a Navy veteran, made one call to the Coast Guard, and the law came riding in. And wait until you hear how justice surfaced right on that dock, with a twist no one saw coming. Eli Ward was 10 years old, and in his eyes his red Schwinn wasn't just a bike, it was his independence. The handlebar basket was dented from a tumble down the trail behind his school. The training wheels were scuffed from long afternoons learning to balance, and the bell only rang if you hit it just right. But none of that mattered. That bike was how he got to the corner store, how he visited friends down the road, and how he raced the sunset back home. Edgewater Bluffs was the kind of neighborhood where kids still fished off docks and neighbors waved from porch swings. That Saturday morning, Eli had left the bike at the edge of the shared dock like he always did, neatly propped beside the post, while he and his dad cast their lines and talked about everything from fishing knots to summer camp. Cole, his father, a calm and steady presence, shaped by years in the Navy and a second career in emergency medicine, had suggested they break for lunch at the deli up the hill. They were gone less than an hour. When they returned, something felt off. Eli ran ahead, his sneakers thudding lightly against the dock's wooden planks, then stopped dead. The space where his bike should have been was empty. "Dad?" His voice cracked in a way that made Cole's stomach tighten. Then they saw it. Just beyond the cattails, barely visible in the murky green water, was a flash of red. The bike was floating upside down, its wheels half submerged, one of the training wheels turning slowly, like a windmill in a dying breeze. Eli's shoulders slumped, then rose again, tight and trembling. His hands clenched into fists, so small and pale they looked like they'd vanish. Cole's instincts screamed to act, to fix, to shield. But even he needed a moment to process what he was looking at. Then, a voice cut through the quiet afternoon. Cold, flat, triumphant. "Next time, don't leave trash on private property." They turned. Janice Porter stood at the start of the dock, clipboard in one hand, sunglasses perched like a visor of authority. She didn't even glance at the sinking bike. Her tone was clipped and emotionless, like someone reciting a parking rule. "The HOA guidelines clearly state no unattended personal items are permitted on communal structures. You can refer to Section 4, Paragraph C. This is your only warning." She smirked. "Not the kind you share when something's funny, but the kind that says you can't touch me." Then she turned and walked away. Not a glance back, not a flicker of regret. Cole stared after her, jaw tight, fists shaking just enough to betray the storm behind his calm eyes. Eli didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His whole body spoke for him, stiff, silent, stunned. Not from the chill off the lake, but from something colder, the realization that adults, grown-ups who should protect, could choose to be cruel. In that moment, something shifted in Cole. This wasn't about a bike anymore. Cole Ward believed in handling things the right way. He'd seen enough chaos in war zones and ambulance bays to know that blowing up rarely solved anything. So, when his son's bike was yanked from the dock and tossed into the lake, his first instinct wasn't revenge. It was resolution. He began with an email, calm, detailed, direct. He laid out the facts, attached a time-stamped photo of where the bike had been parked, and politely requested an explanation. No response. He followed up with a phone call. It rang to voicemail. He tried again the next day. This time, Janice answered. Her tone was clipped and dismissive. "You're welcome to file a complaint with the board," she said, already sounding bored. "But as far as I'm concerned, the matter is closed." She hung up before he could ask about the bike, or the fine that had suddenly appeared in his mailbox. $75, violation of covenant, improper storage, clutter, dock. The wording made it sound like Eli's bike was a refrigerator dumped on a sidewalk. There had been no notice, no warning, no opportunity to move it, just punishment. Cole drove down to the HOA clubhouse in person the next day, hoping that face-to-face civility might help. But he found only closed doors and posted hours that seemed carefully designed to avoid human contact. When he finally reached another board member, the man offered only a helpless shrug. "I'm sorry, but Janice said it was a safety concern," he said. "If something happened to a resident because of that bike, we could be liable." Cole blinked. "It's a kid's bike, on a dock where kids fish." The board member looked away. "I don't make the rules." That was the problem. Nobody did. Not anymore. Back at home, Cole watched his son through the kitchen window. Eli used to ride in wide loops around the cul-de-sac, his shoelaces flapping in the wind and laughter trailing behind him like a banner. Now, the bike path was empty. The new bike Cole had offered still leaned untouched in the garage, its tires untouched by pavement. Eli didn't want it. He didn't say it aloud, but Cole knew. The damage wasn't about the bike. It was about trust. Something invisible had been broken when that Schwinn hit the water. After school, Eli would sit by the living room window and stare at the dock in silence. Not bitter, not sad, just resigned. Like something that had once belonged to him now lived on the other side of a line he couldn't cross. Cole's fury didn't explode. It condensed. It grew heavier, more focused. He didn't raise his voice, didn't post on social media, didn't start fights with neighbors. Instead, he thought about how a woman with a clipboard had reduced a child's joy to a hazard. How she had weaponized the rules that were supposed to keep the neighborhood fair and safe, and how nobody stood up to her. But Janice Porter had underestimated something critical. Cole might have retired from active duty, but the world he came from didn't end at the water's edge. And it just so happened that the Edgewater dock reached into federally regulated water, something he knew very well. Janice didn't know who she had picked a fight with, but she was about to find out. Cole didn't yell. He didn't pound his fists on the HOA's oak conference table. He didn't write angry posts or leave voicemail threats. What he did was far more effective and far more permanent. He filed a formal complaint not with the HOA, but with someone who had real jurisdiction, the U.S. Coast Guard's Marine Safety Office. Most of the HOA board likely didn't realize it, but Edgewater Bluffs' picturesque dock extended several feet into federally protected waters, and under maritime law, especially statutes tied to the Clean Marina Initiative, intentionally dumping any object into a navigable waterway counted as unlawful discharge. That included a child's bicycle, especially one with rubber, grease, and metal components that could leach into the lake. Cole didn't need to bluff. He simply knew the rules better than Janice Porter ever could. When the Coast Guard officer returned his call, Cole was calm, professional, and thorough. He laid out the timeline. He described the event. And most importantly, he shared video footage, crystal clear, time-stamped, captured by his neighbor's doorbell camera. In the footage, Janice could be seen dragging the red Schwinn by the handlebars, muttering under her breath as she yanked it down the dock. Then, without hesitation, she tipped it into the water. No safety concern, no accident, just spite, caught on camera. The officer's voice, previously neutral, took on a firmer tone. "Understood, Mr. Ward. We'll take a look." Cole didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, during the monthly HOA board meeting, an open-air affair held at the Lakeside Pavilion, a Coast Guard patrol vessel appeared from the bend in the lake. It cut across the water with quiet authority, pulled alongside the dock, and eased into position as board members and residents turned to watch. 4 uniformed officers stepped ashore. One carried a stainless steel recovery hook. Another held a clipboard. Without preamble, they began the retrieval. The hook dipped beneath the surface, dragging the red bike from its resting place. Water spilled from the frame, algae clung to the tires, and the bell gave a single, eerie ring as it was lifted back into daylight. The crowd murmured. Children pointed. Phones came out. Then came the paperwork. One officer walked calmly up to Janice Porter, who had risen from her folding chair, her face locked in a confused half-smile. "Ma'am, the officer said, removing his sunglasses. "You are being issued a federal citation for unlawful disposal of a non-biodegradable object into a navigable waterway in violation of the Clean Water Act. We are also opening a formal inquiry into potential environmental endangerment." There was no yelling, no dramatic confrontation, just protocol. Federal, binding protocol. Janice's smirk drained from her face like color from a photograph. She blinked. For once, she didn't have a rule to hide behind. No clipboard would protect her here. No HOA fine could be leveraged. This was real. The Coast Guard didn't care about neighborhood politics. They cared about the law. And Cole had brought them exactly what they needed. As the patrol boat reversed and pulled away, bike secured, citation served, Janice stood frozen on the dock, pale and silent. And somewhere nearby, Cole Ward allowed himself the smallest smile. He hadn't raised his voice, but his message had been heard. The fallout came quicker than anyone expected. Within a week of the Coast Guard's visit, the HOA board called an emergency session, not to defend Janice Porter, but to distance themselves from her. The federal citation had rattled them. No one wanted to be associated with what the local paper now called a petty act with real consequences. Janice was formally suspended from her position as HOA president, pending the results of the ongoing investigation. There was no ceremony, no farewell statement, just a removed nameplate, a silent email chain, and a neighborhood that suddenly felt a little less controlled. The fine levied against her, $1,237 plus administrative costs, was non-negotiable. The Coast Guard doesn't haggle, especially when it comes to environmental violations. She tried appealing it once, but her request was swiftly denied. The footage didn't lie. Then came the ripple effect. After the story spread, first by word of mouth, then by a few parents on the community app, other families began to come forward. 3 separate households filed formal complaints against Janice, citing overreach, intimidation, and in one case, the unauthorized removal of a teen's soccer net from their backyard. The board, sensing the tide, did something rare. They listened. The clutter clause that Janice had wielded like a sword was quietly rewritten. From now on, no property could be removed from shared spaces without a written warning and a 48-hour grace period. And for the first time, dock areas were specifically designated as bike-friendly zones for children under adult supervision. No one said her name during the meeting. They didn't have to. As for Eli, justice came not in courtrooms or emails, but in a moment he never saw coming. That Saturday afternoon, a Coast Guard vehicle pulled up to the ward's driveway. One of the officers stepped out, opened the hatch, and pulled out something wrapped in plastic. It was the bike, his red Schwinn, cleaned, repaired, and polished. The rust was gone. The bent wheel had been replaced. A new bell had been mounted on the handlebar, still in its packaging. There was a note taped to the frame. "Keep riding, buddy. Stay strong." Eli didn't say anything. He just stared at the bike like it had been resurrected. Then, in one smooth motion, he swung his leg over the seat and took off down the street. His laughter, sharp and free, echoed between the houses as he flew towards the lake trail, wind tugging at his hoodie, pedals spinning like nothing had ever gone wrong. Cole stood on the porch with his arms folded, watching his son disappear down the curve. His expression wasn't smug. It wasn't proud. It was steady, like a man who had weathered the storm and now stood in the quiet sun that followed. He hadn't wanted revenge. He didn't need an apology. He just wanted his son to believe that right still meant something. And that day, he did.